What up, everybody? We'll get going here in just a few minutes. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Sleuth Intuition channel. I'm your host, Patrick Vallejos. And I am broadcasting to you live from Phoenix, Arizona. Let's welcome in everybody. Doris Brockman, Pitbull Mom, Frank Meister, Jill Moser, Beth Gonzalez, Farmer, Charlotte, Shadowbox, No Effects Punk, GP. Welcome in, everybody. So we are going to be looking into another disturbing case of a psychopath by the name of Arthur John Shawcross. Now, is also known as the Genesee River Killer. He was an American serial killer active in Rochester, New York from 1972 through 1989. So we are going to deep dive into the case of the Genesee River Killer. Welcome in, Vertigo Brain. Good to see you. Hope everybody's having a great Monday. Okay, so I think we'll start with an overview. Then we'll do some reaction videos or some reaction to some documentary clips and things like that. We'll watch some archived local media reports, a couple articles, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And we'll also take a closer look at all of the victims that were involved in these heinous crimes here. Yeah, this dude was beyond a freak. He shares a lot of similarities with people like the Green River Killer, Ted Bundy. He would actually revisit the crime scene and mess with his victims, even sometimes attacking them and mutilating the corpse. So we'll try to do our best to understand why they do that. We know that Ted Bundy was a necrophiliac. I mean, that's beyond disgusting. Hey, Phil Bond, welcome in. Joni, welcome in. Joni says, hello. He started in my hometown in Watertown, New York. Yep, that's where he killed a young boy and a girl. And under the terms of a plea bargain, he was allowed to plead guilty to one charge of manslaughter, and he only served 14 years. They sentenced him to 25 years, which is also already ridiculous. And then he only served 14 of a 25-year sentence. Some bullshit. Shane, welcome in, Shane. Classmate of mine, 10-year-old boy and girl. Here's the photo of the boy here. Jack Owen Blake, and we'll learn a little bit more about him. Let me share my screen with you guys. So that is Jack Owen Blake, reported to be his first victim. All right, let's take a look at Karen Hill. Karen Ann Hill, to be exact. Couldn't find too many photos of her online. She was 8 years old. She was killed on September 1972, found that same day. She was found 4 days before they found Jack Blake's body. She was raped and suffocated with grass stuffed in her nose and mouth. Her body discarded beneath a bridge spanning the Black River. Shawcross was an immediate suspect known for his trouble with neighborhood children, having lately paid a fine for spanking one small boy and stuffing grass into his pants. Now, residents remembered seeing Shawcross with Karen Hill on the day that she vanished. One reported Arthur sitting on the same bridge eating ice cream on the very day her body was discovered. Good to see you, Hiawatha. The Genesee River Killer. Oh, this is beyond evil. This guy would revisit the crime scene before the bodies were discovered and mutilate his victims. One he cut from, I believe, her throat all the way down to her groin. He said he did it out of rage. Well, he would revisit the crime scene because he's a disorganized killer. I think they have his IQ recorded at 88. He would revisit these crime scenes to try to clean them up the best that he can, maybe try to hide them a little bit better. But in some cases, he would actually mutilate the corpse. Yeah, Joni, I'm sorry to hear about that. All right, let's learn a little bit about this fellow here. Shawcross killed most of his victims in 1988 and 1989 after being granted an early parole, which later led to a controversy. A food service worker, Shawcross trawled the streets of Rochester in his girlfriend's 1984 Dodge Omni, later using her 1989 Chevy Celebrity, looking for prostitutes to kill. So he most likely learned from his two victims that he can't be directly connected to them. So he has to ask himself, well, how do I get my hands on my victims? And how do I keep them from being reported quickly? Well, we know that prostitutes are a victim of choice with most of these killers. Shawcross died on November 10th of 2008 while serving a prison sentence of 250 years for his crimes. At the age of 63, Dr. Michael H. Stone, professor of psychiatry at Columbia University and an author on violent behavior, identified Shawcross as one of the most egregious examples of unwarranted release of a prisoner. And looks like you can read about that in his book, The Anatomy of Evil. Yeah, Gary Ridgway was the Green River Killer. He had over 100 victims. I mean, I just can't wrap my mind around that. Welcome in, Amelia. Yeah, very similar names, really. And they're very similar, the MOs and who they targeted, the victimology, the typology. Yeah, I could only imagine, Joni. That reminds me, he's also one of those types who could hide in plain sight. At one point, he would go hang out at the Dunkin' Donuts and kind of chat up the crime or kind of talk with local investigators about the crime. And they wouldn't give intimate details, but they would talk about how they're looking for certain cars, how they're kind of posted up on certain corners. They would provide some information and not realize that they were communicating with the killer. And we've seen that in a few different cases that we've covered. Hey, Thin Mint, good to see you. Sparky, welcome in. Yep. Most times he claims in an interview that he would go back to the crime scene to try to clean up a little bit, try to hide any evidence that he would leave. But investigators, they said he mostly came back to kind of relive the crime and to mutilate the bodies. All right, let's look at his early life. Arthur Shawcross was born in Kittery, Maine, the first of four children of Arthur Roy Shawcross and Elizabeth Bessie Betty Eurorcus Shawcross. His family moved to Watertown, New York when he was young. Shawcross said throughout his childhood he was a frequent bedwetter, which is part of the McDonald triad. So he pretty much fits the bill when it comes to the McDonald triad with his animal cruelty and lighting fires. He later claimed his mother performed oral sex on him for several years, starting when he was age 7, and that during junior high school, he had sexual relations with his sister. Shawcross had a reputation at school as a bully and would frequently act out violently. He dropped out of high school in 1960. In April 1967, at age 21, Shawcross was drafted into the United States Army. At this time, he divorced his first wife and gave up his rights to his 18-month-old son, whom he never saw again. He served one tour of duty with the 4th Supply and Transport Company of the 4th Infantry Division in Vietnam. He later boasted of grotesque combat exploits such as beheading Mama Sands and nailing their heads to trees as a warning to the Viet Cong, and engaging in cannibalism. In reality, he never served in a combat position. After the war, Shawcross was stationed at Fort Sill in Lawton, Oklahoma. As an armorer, his second wife Linda experienced several aspects of his disturbing behavior, especially his penchants for starting fire. An Army psychiatrist told her that Shawcross derived sexual arousal from setting fires, another part of the triad. So we learn a lot about, I think, the beginnings of these types of killers through that triad, right? Gateway crimes. We did a live stream on gateway crimes, torturing of animals, and arson. And we talk about that a little bit, trying to connect Delphi and Flora possibly. Flora being arson, which would be a gateway crime, right? You start victimizing at a not so personal level, throw an accelerant and light it on fire, and then you can walk away. You're not personal, you're not hands-on, and then potentially evolving into something much worse. Welcome in, Boston Christian. New York, Waterton, and Rochester. After his discharge from the Army, Shawcross moved with Linda from Oklahoma to Clayton, New York. Linda would soon divorce him, after which he began committing crimes such as arson and burglary. Shawcross's offenses earned him a 5-year sentence at Attica Correctional Facility and later Auburn Correctional Facility. After serving 22 months, he was granted an early release in October of 1971, in part due to his role in the rescue of a correctional officer during a prison riot. Shawcross returned to his hometown of Waterton, New York, eventually getting a job with the Watertown Public Works Department and marrying for the third time. On May 7th, 1972, he raped and killed his first known victim, 10-year-old Jack Owen Blake, after luring the boy into a wooded area in Watertown. Blake's body was not found until authorities received a tip by telephone on September 5th. So it's my understanding that Arthur Shawcross, he would go down to this area to go fishing. He wouldn't keep any of the fish. He would catch and release. And every once in a while, he would bring some of the young kids from the neighborhood down with them, show them how to fish, or just accompany them. Well, on this specific day, he took Jack Owen Blake alone. Usually it was with his older brother. And that's when he raped and murdered him. Blake's body was not found until authorities received a tip by telephone on September 5th. On September 2nd, just prior to the body's discovery, Shawcross raped and killed 8-year-old Karen Ann Hill, who had been visiting Watertown with her mother for Labor Day weekend. He was arrested the next day. A grand jury indicted Shawcross for murder and Hill's death. On October 17, 1972, he was allowed to plead guilty to a lesser charge of first-degree manslaughter for both deaths and was sentenced to an indeterminate term with a maximum of 25 years at Attica Correctional Facility. Um, that's egregious. In November, he was transferred to Greenhaven Correctional Facility. Jefferson County District Attorney William McCluskey explained the plea bargain by stating that other than Shawcross's confessions to police, there was no direct evidence linking him to the Blake killing. McCluskey also suggested Shawcross could have argued at trial that he was under extreme emotional disturbance, and a jury would have been likely to arrive at a verdict of manslaughter. After Shawcross was in prison for 14 years, inexperienced prison staff and social workers concluded that Shawcross was no longer dangerous, disregarding the warnings of psychiatrists who had assessed Shawcross as a schizoid psychopath. He was released on parole in April of 1987. Shawcross had difficulty settling down as neighbors would protest his presence and employers would refuse to hire him. He first moved to Binghamton, New York, and then relocated to Delhi with the girlfriend Rose Marie Wally. When Delhi residents became aware of Shawcross's presence, the people moved to nearby Fleischmann's, only to be met with hostility there as well. In late June of 1987, Shawcross parole officer moved him and Wally into a transient hotel in Rochester, but failed to notify local authorities of this action. In mid-October, Shawcross and Wally found more permanent lodgings at 241 Alexander Street in Rochester. So the fact that they didn't notify local police is the reason that they weren't able to label him as a suspect. If they would have, he would have been first on that list. But instead, he was able to sit down at a Dunkin' Donuts and chop it up with investigators and glean information into his own murders. What's up, Don Spain? Welcome in, my friend. In March of 1988, Shawcross began murdering again, primarily targeting prostitutes in the Rochester area. Before his capture less than 2 years later, he was convicted of 11 murders, with the 12th not officially ascribed to him, and I believe that would be Owen Blake. Good to see you, No Effects. Yeah, says so many of these type guys have military, big to some extent. Well, some people go to the military to be a patriot, and others go there to kill, in hopes of being able to murder. Not all of them, but there are some that admit to that. They want to do it legally. Okay, let's move on. Let's see. All the victims were murdered in Monroe County except for Gibson, who was killed in neighboring Wayne County. Retired detective Robert Capel has argued that the detectives investigating the case over-relied on the concept of modus operandi, at times searching for multiple suspects due to small differences in the profiles of each victim. See, in some cases, these guys, they evolve, right? His first victims were people that he knew, and he dumped the bodies in places where they would end up being found quickly. So he knew not to do that. So after each murder, he would evolve in some way. On January 5th, 1990, 2 days after June Cicero's body was discovered, an aerial surveillance police arrested Shawcross. He had been spotted by an eyewitness and a police surveillance team standing near his car, apparently masturbating on a bridge over Salmon Creek near where Cicero's body had been dumped. So he's 100% a sexual sadist. Trial and conviction. In November of 1990, Shawcross was tried by Monroe County First Assistant District Attorney Charles Day Siragusa for the 10 murders in Monroe County. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. with testimony from the forensic psychiatrist Dorothy Lewis that he had brain damage. And we're going to look into all this stuff in more detail. We have videos, we have parts from documentaries, and a few other articles. Multiple personality disorder, now known as dissociative identity disorder and post traumatic stress disorder, and had been sexually abused as a child. He says by his mother, and she refutes those claims, by the way. Lewis also claimed that Shawcross moved into a separate internal personality named Bessie when he killed, arguing for him to be institutionalized rather than being returned to the prison system. In response to the defense's claim that Shawcross' actions were the product of post traumatic stress disorder resulting from his war service, FBI criminal profiler Robert K. Ressler reviewed the claim on behalf of the prosecution before the trial. Ressler wrote that Shawcross's claim of having witnessed wartime atrocities was patently outrageous and untrue. Prosecution psychiatrist Dr. Park Dietz testified that Shawcross had antisocial personality disorder. It was later determined that Shawcross had a cyst pressing on the temporal lobe of his brain, as well as scarring on his frontal lobes, areas that are responsible for decision making and self control. Shawcross was incarcerated at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York, where he was held until his death. In 2003, Shawcross was interviewed by British reporter Catherine English for a documentary on cannibalism. He bragged about slicing out and eating the vulvae of 3 victims, but refused to discuss his earlier claims of eating the genitals of his first victim, Jack Blake. That's horrible. Officials said 63-year-old Shawcross complained of pain in his leg on the afternoon of November 10th, 2008. He was taken to Albany Medical Center, where he went into cardiac arrest and died shortly thereafter. He was pronounced dead at 9:50 p.m. All right, let's take a look at this article here. It's titled How Serial Killers Work. Yep, 100%, Beth. Not only that, he was kind of hiding in plain sight. Like they referred to him as a normal guy. The prostitutes trusted him because every time he would visit them, he wouldn't murder them. You know, he was just a regular what are they called, Johns? So he just seemed like a normal guy, and then just for whatever reason out of nowhere he would just decide, you know what? Today's the day. And he would always blame his victim. No, I think a total of 12 and one that's not attributed 100% to him. But it's most likely more. Don says it's always the same story. They let these freaks back out into the public, and I don't understand why. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. If you have somebody that's mutilating, you know, has multiple victims, young children, I mean, why would you should sentence them like 50 years for each victim, if not just the death penalty right off the bat, but 25 years total, and then you serve 15. Okay, this is by Shanna Freeman. And they kind of talk about the frontal lobe. And we're going to look at an interview between, I believe it was a neurologist or maybe even a psychiatric neurologist who interviews um, Shawcross. It kind of shows us pictures of his brain. And he has like a cyst, I believe, growing right here. He was hit with a sledgehammer on the front of his head. And he's saying it's all of those things along with being sexually molested as a child, and states if that wouldn't have happened, he wouldn't have done what he did. But a lot of people disagree with that. But let's read this article here. For some people, the only way to explain serial murder is to say that serial killers are insane. Some serial killers do plead not guilty by reason of insanity as a defense, but are all of them insane or even mentally ill? According to the U.S. Code, an insanity defense means that at the time of the commission of the acts constituting the offense, the defendant, as a result of severe mental disease or defect, was unable to appreciate the nature and quality of the wrongfulness of his acts. Mental disease or defect does not otherwise constitute a defense. Basically, a serial killer arguing not guilty by reason of insanity must prove that he did not understand right from wrong at the time that he killed. But it can be difficult to prove that he really did not understand that his actions would result in the death of his victims. Only two serial killers have successfully pled insanity. John Douglas, long term head of the FBI's investigative support unit, believes that serial killers don't have a problem understanding what death means and that they have the power to kill. Some serial killers have been diagnosed by psychologists and psychiatrists as psychopaths, the official term in the Diagnostic and Standard Manual of Mental Disorders. Fourth edition DSM 5 is antisocial personality disorder, APD. According to the DSM, a person with APD follows a pattern of disregard and violation of the rights of others occurring since age 15 years. This pattern includes 7 factors, 3 of which must be met for diagnosis, such as failure to conform to social norms, irritability and aggressiveness, and lack of remorse. Psychopaths are not insane. They do know right from wrong, but this diagnosis may explain their behavior during their killing cycles. Brain injury. Some researchers theorize that serial killers have brain damage or other biological abnormalities that contribute to their actions. Damage to areas like the frontal lobe, the hypothalamus, and the limbic system can contribute to extreme aggression, loss of control, loss of judgment, and violence. Henry Lee Lucas, who was convicted of 11 murders, was shown to have extreme brain damage in these areas, probably the result of childhood abuse, malnutrition, and alcoholism. Arthur Shawcross, another 11-time serial killer, was found to have several brain injuries, including 2 skull fractures. While in prison, he suffered from headaches and often blacked out. Bobby Joe Long, convicted of 9 murders, stated at one point, "After I'm dead, they're going to open up my head and find that, just like we've been saying, part of my brain is black and dry and dead." So if you guys are not disturbed yet, you will be. Welcome in, CJK. Yeah, it could be. Sparky says there's really no way to cure these serial killers. I don't understand why they are even released back into the public. I don't get it either. Hey, V Marie, it's good to see you. Drive safe. Eyes on the road. Yeah, that's right, Dawn. Beep, beep. Who has the keys to my Jeep? Amelia says they go to prison, learn from other predators' crimes, and lay awake at night plotting the day they can victimize again, but more efficiently. Return to society with a vengeance and experience. Yeah, I'll agree to that. All right, let's go ahead and do a quick reaction to some of these documentaries. Some of these are clips. This first one, I think, is a 12-minute documentary. It's pretty interesting. So I think we should start there. Thanks, Joni. You guys can't hear that at all? Amelia's reporting no volume, so I just want to double check on that. Can you guys hear the video or no? Welcome in, Indy. Boston, this is so upsetting and sick. Did they arrest the ones responsible for letting him out? No, of course not. They never do. All right, let's try this again. Okay, let me know if you guys can hear this right away.
The late 80s was a dark time in Rochester's history. Serial killer Arthur Shawcross was strangling women and dumping their bodies in and around the city.
Okay, how about that? All right, perfect.
Captain Lynn Johnston and his homicide investigators worked countless hours for months in a race to
Thank you,
identify
Amelia.
and capture the killer
I
and
really
prevent more
appreciate that.
deaths. Johnston, a 51-year veteran of the force, wrote every detail of the wrenching and exhaustive investigation in one of these palm-sized notebooks.
During the interview, Shawcross admitted the following homicides in which he was charged with murder second for each. Dorothy Blackburn from 3/24/88, Anna Steffens from 9/11/88, Dorothy Keeler from October 21st, 1989, Patricia Ives from October 27th, 1989, Frances Brown from 11/11/1989, June Stott from 11/23/89, Maria Walsh, who was reported missing 11/6/89, Darlene Trippi, who had been reported missing 12/15/89, June Cicero, who was reported missing 12/16/89, Elizabeth Gibson, who was found dead on 11/27/89, and Felicia Stevens, who was reported missing 11/28/89, and subsequently her body was found and recovered on October the 4th, 1990. And
Arthur Shawcross's first victim was found in the county suburbs and was under investigation by the sheriff's office when his first Rochester victim was discovered. A man who was
I just want to let you guys know if you go doing your own investigating into this case or doing your own research, just be careful because they have a whole plethora of crime scene photos on there that are extremely disturbing. So as long as you don't type in crime scene or anything like that, it was pretty easy to avoid those. But I was a little bit taken back by that. I wasn't expecting all of that. So just be careful when you guys are doing your own research.
Was out collecting bottles was the one who stumbled upon the corpse.
And he's down by the YMCA on Driving Park there. So there's a big, in fact, today there's a nice little park down in that area. And he was collecting these bottles, and he comes across what he believed was
Hey, blind.
a body that had been decayed, and skeletal remains. So the police were called. Whoever killed her took some time to put like a rock on her hair so it would hide the hair, and found some old shingles from maybe a roofing job, and that had been thrown in these plastic bags and kind of disregarded, and then brought it back and put some brush on it, and so it was to hide it. It was one that always stuck to me because it took a while to identify her. And there was a doctor, his name was Rodriguez, used to work for the medical examiner's office. He reconstructed the profile of the face by using the clay, and it actually got published in the Democrat and Chronicle and the Times Union.
Look how close this is.
And it was very quick. Within
Looks just like her.
Publication, the father called and identified the daughter. Then
Very similar, right?
Identifying her through dental.
After Anna Steffen, there would be more victims. Too many victims for police to ignore the possibility that one person was responsible for the crimes.
So about what point in time does it start? Is that when it kind of becomes clear we may have a serial killer, or do you think it would?
I put it in my mind with the finding of the body of Patricia Ives. But there was a hedge line behind the YMCA, and some young kids were playing softball, and they hit the ball into the hedgerow, and then when they went into the hedgerow, they found the body of this woman that was left there. And her head was put down into like a woodchuck hole. So she was pretty badly decomposed. And then there was other girls missing from that Lyle Avenue area at the same time, which ended up being found much later on. So it was about that point that I had a really uneasy feeling about what was going on.
As investigators became more convinced of a serial killer, they turned for the first time to the FBI Behavioral Sciences Unit, a group of men and women who create profiles of criminal suspects. To help the profilers, investigators in Rochester created a war room lined with all of the evidence they had collected from the murder scenes.
You got to remember, these guys were under a lot of pressure. I mean, we didn't feel it so much from the community, but these guys are so age-driven. They feel responsible, and if we don't solve it, and if it's truly a serial killer going on, then somebody else is going to die, and you don't want to be responsible for that. So there's a lot of pressure.
For investigators, the hunt for a serial killer began to take its toll. Many were physically and emotionally exhausted as the hours mounted.
We're doing everything. We're combing every record, every field interview, parking tickets, moving tickets, you name it. We were doing it. Sometimes they had to put our heads on our desk because we didn't go home for a couple of days. I wanted them at least to have a day with their families, because they'd been burning themselves out trying to solve these crimes. And wouldn't you know, on Thanksgiving Day, a guy was down in Turning Point Park, which is down in Charlotte, walking his dog. The dog got real crazy and ran into the cat tails that they had down there. What it was is that underneath a carpet, and it snowed a little bit, so it was really, you couldn't see her. And yet he lifted it up and saw an arm, dropped it down, and called the police. So I had to call everybody back to work. Remember that day, the activity of the person that was doing this killings has accelerated. He was doing different things now. Very gloomy day, a cold day.
Evolving.
Had no idea who it was. And here we are in the middle of another one. And we still have girls missing. It was probably the low point of the whole investigation.
June Stotts One of the killer's victims was not a prostitute, but her death and the reasons that Shawcross would later give for the murder provided a glimpse into his twisted psychology.
You've got to take Shawcross with a grain of salt.
I think
He's
it was a roommate
pathological liar. This is what
who was
he's
stealing
saying.
from him.
But if you believe it 100%, I would never believe anything he said as 100%. But he's claiming that they got talking about having sex, and she said she was a virgin, and he claimed after they were having intercourse that she wasn't. That made him angry because she lied, so therefore he had to kill her. Killers will often go back to these scenes to relive the fantasy. And this is exactly what he did here, because he went back and took her clothes and threw them in the river. On January 3rd, 1990,
Sound
State
familiar?
Police Aviation saw a body under the Spencerport Brockport Road, which is Route 31 out near Brockport. And Aviation saw an individual sitting in a car on top of the bridge with his legs outside the vehicle. When he saw the helicopter, he threw something out onto the ice, got into his car and drove away. And he was later picked up at a nursing home. I mean, he was brought back to Brockport Police Barracks and gave an accounting of his name. He was fed and allowed to go home.
Overnight, investigators did a ton of work. They visited Shawcross's workplace, G&G Cheese, and found that the shop used handy wipes that matched those found at 2 crime scenes. The same handy wipes were also found in Shawcross's home.
I assume he was probably under watch at home.
Oh, you got that right.
I assume he wasn't going to leave.
Oh, yeah. We had some people sitting drinking coffee out on the road all night long. Yeah, he wasn't going anywhere.
While Shawcross waited at home overnight, police looked for evidence to link him to the killings.
So that composite, the police were onto the guy, but not by name, because they went down to G&G Cheese where he worked, showed the composite, and they talked to management. Well, management works during day, and they didn't recognize him. And talked about a car. Well, Arthur never took a car to work. He took a bicycle.
When police again questioned Shawcross, they asked him about a prostitute he actually had not killed. This was a woman who had reported her scary encounter with him to police.
He was kind of stonewalling the investigators for a bit, and then confronted them with that information about the girl down in Grand Eastman. And he remembered that, and they really had a lot of information, so they knew what they were talking about. And so he had one request, and that was to talk to his wife, Rose. And he said, if I talk to Rose, I'll tell you everything. So we gave him the most briefest opportunity to talk to Rose. And then we had photographs of all the girls and like a deck of cards. Goes, yep, nope, yep, nope. And he shuffled them out and said, I didn't do these, but I did this. Then he would start talking about each of the crimes. Always their fault. Always something they did that made them have to die. But he also then, at the end of those interviews, went with investigators down to Island Cottage Road, recovered Maria Walsh, who had been reported missing back in November, and took them out to Redmond Road, out near where Dorothy Blackburn was, and recovered another body in the creek there, Darlene Trippy. I never really ran into anything quite like it before. You were so consumed, and all your time is spent on solving these crimes, and you're putting in enormous hours and trying to come up with a suspect, figuring if you didn't, the acceleration of the girls that were missing, the ones that we found dead, Somebody else is going to die. So there are a lot of internal pressure that all of us are facing in 18 hours, 20 hours, a couple days at a time. Your body's accelerated. And then I remembered after he was arrested, going home and walking up the stairway and absolutely crying.
The late 80s was a dark time in Rochester's
Sorry,
history.
guys. Okay, I'm gonna try to fix this weird delay we got going. But yeah, Joni, I noticed that we're gonna watch an interview with him, and anytime he goes into detail of his crimes, he starts blinking really fast. So you guys hang out for just a second. I'm gonna try to refresh this. I noticed there was a weird delay. Sometimes that happens. All right, we'll see if that fixed it. Can you guys hear me okay? Appreciate that, Don. Yeah, if you guys could please hit the like button, go share this video real quick. Probably be here for another, possibly another hour. Okay, this is from crime classification, the crime classification manual put out by the FBI. And they roughly divide serial killers into 3 categories: organized, disorganized, and mixed. While the organized serial killers are usually smart, plan their crimes beforehand, follow a precise and thorough ritual, and especially use equipment they brought with them, and feel no regrets, the disorganized serial killer obey an uncontrollable urge, used weapons found on the scene, and usually have regrets in the aftermath. So that kind of reminds us of the Delphi murders, right? More of a disorganized serial killer, somebody who's showing a little bit of a conscience. Because of afterthoughts like regrets or fear to be discovered, the disorganized serial killers can return to the crime scene, hiding in the crowd. And an investigation method is to take pictures of the crowd on each crime scene in order to search for persons suspects possibly appearing within the crowd. So I've actually seen that done before. All right, let's try this again. Here's some old photos. Man, he just looks like a creep. Yeah, sound was good, but there was like a bit of a delay. It's like a 2-second delay. Kind of looks like an old Chinese movie or something. Like one of those old kung fu movies. Good to see you, Caricature. Yes, disorganized and regretful sounds like Richard Allen Sleuth agree. Yeah, For sure. Yeah, this guy is. I think there's a lot we don't know. Some of the things I guarantee that there's more victims. Kind of like with Israel Keys, he only wants you to see the ones that kind of tell a true crime type story. He's not going to go and tell you all the ones that you're not aware of yet. Maybe in a nearby county or something. Looks like that was from 99. I don't know who the hell that is. It's kind of weird. All right, let's go look at a quick couple of clips from two separate documentaries where he was actually interviewed.
Why are you holding your penis?
Yeah, this dude's really weird. Didn't agree with him and thought he was just making it up, malingering, so to speak. They even spoke directly with his mother, who asked, like, why is he saying these things about me? Why is he saying that I molested him and doing all these things? And I couldn't help but think about Kagan Klein. You remember how he tried to throw his father under the bus for whatever reason? So it's hard to know, was he actually molested as a child or was he not? And why do these criminals, why do they throw their folks under the bus? And I know some of them definitely are being abused and molested as children, but not all of them. So why would they lie like that? Maybe to gain sympathy? I'm not quite sure. Let's go to Joni. Says, I don't believe it. I don't believe it either. I mean, think about it. He's sitting there next to a female psychiatrist and he's touching himself. I don't think it has anything to do with him actually being under hypnosis. I think he just wanted to touch himself while he was in the same room with a woman.
Jury, have you agreed upon a verdict? Yes, ma'am.
After hearing 3 weeks of evidence, the jury were unconvinced by the argument that Shawcross was insane.
I agree with that,
They
Don.
found him guilty on all the counts of murder. He was sentenced to 250 years in jail.
How do you find?
Well, at least he died in prison. Hey, what's up, Mustang? Sleuth watched an interview with him. He blinks like that the whole time. Yeah, it's crazy. Here's another. Let me see how long this video is. I know they interview him briefly. I think it's about 6 minutes. Yeah, this is just a cop-out, though. Let's go to Hiawatha here. How did he not have conscious knowledge of what he was doing when he went back to several crime scenes? Right. That throws out this guy's whole fucking hypothesis here. That what you learn from me today will help people down the road. Do you really think that this guy cares? And I understand that certain things, brain injury will cause you to will change you completely. But to say that this guy wasn't aware that by becoming a serial killer that he wasn't doing evil acts or he didn't know the difference between right or wrong. And if I feel like this doctor is saying, well, because he was molested and because of the abnormalities in his brain and the trauma that he felt in his brain, that somehow that's an excuse for what he's done. I don't like that. Let's go to blind squirrel here. Poor, pitiful Arthur John Shawcross. He was just looking for sympathy. This guy was evil personified. 100%. I mean, he might have a propensity for it, but he knew. He knows what he's doing. This guy's over here playing with his feet and shit. He's like, I just wanted somebody to give me a foot massage. Character says it's a cop-out, but he still probably has the history listed. Maybe. But it is a cop-out, and that's the point. Mustang says it is usually a cop-out with all of them. Most of them aren't crazy, in my opinion. They just don't give a frack. Sparky says, I know plenty of people who had childhood traumas, sexual assault, and abuse that they have never done or even thought of doing harm to anyone. Yeah, I think what they call that is like tendencies. So if you, let's say you're diagnosed with the personality disorder like sociopath or psychopathy, something like that, and then you also have head trauma and then abuse as a child. So you have tendencies, yes, I'll give them that. Like, yeah, you have a tendency, but you still know the difference between right and wrong, and you did it because you chose to. Hiawatha says, yes, he may have had the childhood trauma, but I don't believe for a minute that he wasn't aware of his actions. And I agree. Yeah, whatever, huh, Pitbull? Yeah, why don't you just let them cut your head open now so they can take a look at your brain? Why wait? Why wait? I think there is an underlying issue of some description antisocial behavior. It's all listed in the DSM-IV. It gives the academic clinician something to justify all those years of book learning. Yeah. That doctor actually looked like he was enjoying hanging out with this guy. Makes you, you might want to keep an eye on that dude. Glad you cleared that up, Sleuth. I was afraid he was playing with something else while talking to the woman. No, he was. He was touching himself. At the beginning, she says, why are you holding your penis? And he says, Mom's got me. But he would, I think that was all bullshit. He was doing that because he was in the room with the woman. And that was his excuse for doing so. Caricature. These things don't make you a killer, but lots of killers have these things in their history. Yeah. So I say tendency. You'll have you're more likely to become a serial killer if you have certain things. Trauma in childhood, maybe a brain injury, and a personality disorder. Thank you, Mustang. So you got to watch out for that McDonald triad. Peeing in the bed. They don't look at that as much now because I guess it's more common. But if you have all three of those things, right? Peeing in bed, torturing animals, and you like lighting things on fire. That's a creepy movie. Exactly. That was disgusting. He's like tickling his feet and shit. It's like he was getting off on hanging out with a serial killer or something. Giving me Dexter vibes. The mentality of those professionals is what gets these guys back out on the streets. Exactly. I'll agree with that.
Thank you so much, Marty. Well, say the name Arthur Shawcross, and what do you imagine? Well, you're right, and you're not the only one. Lori Mara is a local playwright who has written a play about Arthur Shawcross, and she is with us in studio today. Lori is part of a program at Jiva Theater called What's Next? And this is great because it gets all these playwrights together, and basically it takes your work and has people look at them and give you constructive criticism, criticism that you wouldn't necessarily get from your family or your friends, right?
Right.
Lori, first of all, you're from Rochester, so you were here when the Arthur Shawcross murders were happening.
Yes.
What made you think about writing a play about Arthur Shawcross?
Well, two things really. I had suddenly heard on the news that he had died 2 years ago. And I started thinking about it because there was this interesting tie-in both with my life here in Rochester, but also I had moved here to attend college from
I've read about Arthur Shawcross's life. He was a very interesting man. Is it in the sense that he befriended police officers? He would go to places where they hung out, where the local police watering holes, and listen in on what they talk about. Some very bizarre behavior on his part. What did you learn about Arthur Shawcross through your research?
I did do a tremendous amount of research. I love to do that with all of my plays. I really dive in. And so I did do a lot of research on Arthur Shawcross. I found out a couple of things, but I think one of the lines that I read in one of the biographies that I took and sort of wanted to capture the essence in the play is, one of the psychologists who had studied him said, well, this is a guy who, if you're sitting with him, comes off of just being a typical upstate New York guy. And I thought, how does someone with this kind of mind personify that on a day-to-day level? Because he really was a very, very troubled individual from very childhood as a youth right on through, always in and out of jail. And really, it was a difficult thing to study, to do the play. It really was. It was frightening and quite horrific. So there's these sort of two sides to him. And it was very interesting.
The play itself, though, is about a journalist who scores, what we would call in the business a big, a get, a great interview. But something happens to that journalist. He discovers something else, not necessarily about Arthur Shawcross.
Right. So the playwright part of me wanted to study what it's like for a person who would sort of be considered mainstream normal person in society, and what happens when they come into that space of a serial killer in that mind, and what kind of effect that can have on a person. And so I really wanted to study that perspective, and that's what I sort of allowed myself to do. So the journalist is quite the focal point of the play.
Now, how many characters? You have a character playing Arthur Shawcross?
Yes.
What were some of the requirements for that actor? What did you look for, or what are you looking for in that actor?
Well, actually, the director from Jiva, Gene Ryan, cast the role, and I've seen it in the first reading. This had one reading in the regional playwright series, and the person she cast is absolutely perfect. So they just did a wonderful job of getting someone who could give you that sort of, I'm this regular guy, until he really gets into his dialogue.
Yeah. Now this this What Next Festival of New Theater goes from November 4th through the 14th. Already started, goes through the 14th. And so when will people be able to go see your work?
The work is being read Wednesday night, November 10th at 7 p.m.
Which also is the 2nd anniversary
of his death to the day. It was a little creepy because it was completely coincidental.
Yeah. Can you tell us what's next, or are you just strictly focusing on this right now as far for your work?
Oh, no, I tell people I have many voices in my head.
Okay.
I'm working on quite a bit. Right now, I'm working on something. I'm going back to my roots, which is comedy.
Okay,
and I'm working on a farce.
Okay,
so that will be kind of fun. Yeah.
Well, Lori, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Again, you can see Lori's work about Arthur Shawcross at...
Yeah, let's go see a play on Arthur Shawcross. Interesting. I tried to find a YouTube video of it, but I couldn't find it. Exactly, Don. A play. What's next? A musical? Springtime for a Shawcross. Yeah, I thought you guys would get a kick out of that. And then here was another situation. It's kind of confusing, but I'll play it anyway. We're almost done here, so.
Every time you drive this route,
Yep.
do you think about that night?
Every time.
A News 10 NBC investigation 35 years in the making.
Why would the case still be open?
They're never closed.
The woman who believes she saw the last victim of Rochester's worst serial killer.
What bothers you?
That it's not solved.
For many of you, especially the families of the victims, hearing the name and seeing the face of Arthur Shawcross may evoke some terrible memories.
He murdered 11 women in the late 1980s, burying their bodies around the county. But the case of one woman linked to Shawcross early on has never been solved, and it has haunted two women who believe they may have been the last to see her alive.
They have never told their story until tonight with Chief Investigative Reporter Berkeley Brigham.
October 1989.
Yes.
You're driving here on 490, heading home with your friend.
Yep.
Kristen Beaton and her friend Wendy Malcolm were 19, back from college for the weekend and heading home to Hilton after a night out in the city. But as they approached the canal just before 390, their lives changed.
A woman just runs out in front of us and we have to slam on our brakes. She has blood on her and everything.
Kristen says they saw a man come out from the dark after the woman and get into a parked car on the side of the highway. The girls wanted to call 911, but this was 1989, so they had to drive and find a payphone. They found one at the Lyle Avenue Wegmans.
So here's where you called 911.
Yes.
Before police got
Hiawatha, I think his first two victims were the only children. The rest, I think, were the majority of them were prostitutes above the age of 18, I believe. But we're going to take a look at all the victims right now.
got to 490, the woman crawled into the middle lane and was hit and killed by a car.
It's more than she got hit by a car. Someone brutally attacked her, and that has been kind of not out there.
The woman killed was Linda Lee Himes. At the same time she was killed, police were finding the bodies of women around the county, usually near water. In DNC stories,
the serial killings, the capture,
and News 10 NBC special reports, Himes was among the list of potential victims of Arthur Shawcross. His targets were always prostitutes. And both Himes and Shawcross lived on Alexander Street, less than half a mile apart.
For a long time, you have felt that the person, the man you saw on that highway could have been Arthur Shawcross.
Right?
I still do. Yeah, for sure.
The
Linda
mullets.
Lee Himes. In the old Democrat and Chronicle articles, she is up there on the array of possible Shawcross victims. She's not among the official victims of Shawcross. Why not?
Well, for some reasons, which I can't disclose because the case is, even believe it or not, after all these years, it's still open. So I got to be careful. But it just didn't match.
Yep, I agree,
Have a
Hiawatha.
good effect on.
Lynn Johnson was one of the RPD investigators assigned to the serial murders. At one point, 17 women were potential victims.
You're in my head, Sparky. You're in my
In
head.
the end, Shawcross was convicted of killing 11. Himes was not one of them, and her case was never closed.
But she was hit by a car. That was her cause of death.
That's true.
Right.
But there's something that happened prior to that. There was at least an assault that happened.
Shortly before 3 a.m., Sunday, October the 8th.
This is the News 10 NBC Crime Stopper story on Himes. State Police closed 490 for the reenactment. With the voice of Warren Doremus, the story replayed Himes coming in front of the girl's car. But it also describes the man who got into the car as being black. That was one of the reasons why Himes was dismissed as a possible Shawcross victim.
Maybe, I guess, someone will consider looking at her case again.
Kristen was interviewed by police twice, but she can't recall her description of the man in the car. I told her what police told me.
They're pretty convinced that it was not Shawcross.
Okay.
It was somebody, but it wasn't him.
Okay. So that makes me even more want this story out there. Because there's someone, if it wasn't Arthur Shawcross, then it was someone
Yeah, I agree
that
with that.
hurt her. And that person could be walking this earth right now. And she deserves justice.
Kristen told me that, listen to
Hey,
this.
what's up,
She
Gambies?
pictures Linda Lee Himes every single time she drives 490 West. And she wonders if Linda's life would have been saved if she and her friend had just stayed there. Now, I want to show you something. Let's go this way. We learned that Linda Lee Himes was buried at Riverside Cemetery this week. And with the help of a map and the cemetery staff, we found her unmarked gravesite. It's plot 203. And this metal marking is the only thing that signifies her final resting spot. We have been unable to find any of Linda's relatives, Brett and Deanna, but today I reached out to the funeral home, the local funeral home that did her service 35 years ago, and hopefully with them, we might be able to connect with her family if they want to talk to us.
So when was the last time anything was done with Linda's case?
So RPD looked at the file, and they found that the last report filed was 1991.
Wow.
And every single investigator assigned to this case has retired.
Yeah.
But they did say, if something new comes in now, they will assign an investigator to this.
So that goes to all of you out there watching. You know, if you knew anything from that time, or you think you might have some helpful information that could change everything for that case, they can reopen it and give them something to work with. Good to see you, Gambies. Okay, so as we start to wind down, let's go ahead and take a look here. Now, I took this from murderpedia.org. It's basically a timeline and a list of Shawcross's victims. So they have him listed characteristics. Some of them listed are mutilation and cannibalism. So that must have been what he was doing when he returned back to the scene. Number of victims, 13. Basically 1972 through 1990. Arrested January of 1990. He was born 1945. Method of murder, strangulation, suffocation, beating. Sometimes he would return and use a knife to mutilate the bodies. Sentenced to 25 years in prison, released on parole, March 1987, where he then became one of the most prolific serial killers. Rochester, New York, near Waterman. Okay, Jack Blake, he was 10 years old. He was killed April 7th, 1972. He was found in a shallow grave outside of town, beaten to death and sexually abused. Karen Ann Hill was 8 years old, killed September 1972. Body was found same month. She was found 4 days before they found Jack Blake's body. She was raped and suffocated with grass stuffed in her nose and mouth. Her body discarded beneath a bridge spanning the Black River. Shawcross was an immediate suspect, known for his trouble with neighborhood children, having lately paid a fine for spanking one small boy and stuffing grass into his pants. Now residents remembered seeing Shawcross with Karen Hill on that day. She vanished. One reported Arthur sitting on the same bridge eating ice cream on the very day her body was discovered. See, that just goes to show you how premeditated this was. I mean, this guy is just, he's like wallowing in it. He's enjoying it. He's having his ice cream and he's reliving and fantasizing about the crime. Shawcross was arrested on October 3rd, 1972. Shawcross stalled for 2 weeks before confessing to both murders. A bargain was struck in return for a guilty plea to Karen Hill slaying. No charges would be filed in the death of Jack Blake. Furthermore, the Hill case was reduced from murder to first-degree manslaughter under the statute that acknowledges the killer's extreme emotional disturbance. Shawcross was sentenced to 25 years, Penny's divorce action adding insult to injury. No one was surprised than Art's prosecutor when Shawcross was approved for parole in April of 1987. After serving less than 15 years, the state sent him to Binghamton, New York, where his well-publicized arrival sparked an instant public fury. Parole officer Robert Kent described Shawcross as possibly the most dangerous individual to have been released to the community in many years. Private citizens were also taking up the battle cry. These women did see pure evil, the devil. We need to learn how to see this coming, guys, if that's ever possible. We need to protect our family members, ourselves, and our neighbors and our friends. That's what this channel is dedicated to, understanding how to help prevent this from happening. Here we learn about our enemies, what makes them tick, how to see them coming, what are the red flags, what to do, what not to do, what situations should we put ourselves in, what constitutes a high-risk situation, fight or flight, never go to a secondary location. Yeah, it's bullshit. Don, 100%. And it's happening still to this day where these people are getting lenient sentences and they're going right out. Not only are they reoffending, but they're committing worse crimes than what they were originally arrested for. Some people choose evil, caricature. You know, the devil is amongst us. Temptation. And that evil can be passed down from generation to generation. This is Dorothy Blackburn, 27 years old. At the time, she was murdered March 15th, 1988. Body was found March 24th, 1988, bearing deep bite marks around the genitals. So that's where the cannibalism comes from. I mean, how terrifying is that? God, that gave me chills. Location, Salmon Creek, northwest of Rochester, USA. She was a prostitute and a drug addict who specialized in oral sex, mistakenly believing it would keep her safe from AIDS. Shawcross strangled her. Later, he complained that she had bitten his penis and called him the F word. This is Anna Steffen, 27-year-old. She was last seen alive on July 8th, 1989. Her body was found September 11th, 1989. Shawcross had picked her up and taken the Genesee River Gorge near Driving Park Bridge. Shawcross claimed that she had offered him sex for $20, but when he was unable to get an erection, she began to make fun of him. He became angry and punched her to the ground. Trying to get away from him, she crawled into the water, but he went in after her and held her under the water by the throat until she drowned. He later told police that he couldn't be bothered trying to conceal her body and just let it float downstream. It later became caught up in the debris downstream where, because of the warmer conditions, it rapidly decomposed. This is Dorothy Keeler. She was 59 years old at the time. She was last seen July 29th, 1989. Body found October 21st, 1989 on Seth Green Island. Dorothy Keeler, a homeless woman, became the second Genesee River victim. Shawcross had met Dorothy when she worked as a waitress in a diner that he frequented. The two struck up a friendship, which had quickly turned into an affair. On a fine afternoon, Arthur was on his way to the river to fish when he stopped to talk to Keeler. When she found out where he was going, she asked if he would take her with him. He agreed. According to Shawcross, they went the morning fishing and making love until around midday when it started to rain. They huddled up under a crude shelter that he had built and shortly after got into an argument about her stealing money and about his relationship with Clara and Rose. He claims that when she threatened to tell the other women about their affair, he became angry and picked up a small log and beat her on the side of the head, killing her instantly. After hiding her body under a fallen tree, he returned home. He later told police that he returned to the spot several months later and removed the skull and dumped it in the river. But there are, from what I understand, there's reports that he kept it for some time. Kind of reminds you of Jeffrey Dahmer. Joni says Jack loved fishing. He had his fishing pole with him. That's how we got him. Yep, that's what I read. Fishermen eventually found Keeler's remains, but Shawcross was never connected with the woman, even though he had been seen with her regularly and often went to the fishing spot where he had left her body. Her severed skull is missing to this day. Patricia Ives. She was known as Crazy Patty. 25 years old. Killed September 29th, 1989. Found October 27th, 1989. Shawcross claimed that she offered him sex for $25 when he approached the same diner where Dorothy Keeler had worked. He agreed, and they went to a construction site and lay down on a mound of earth. While they were having sex, Shawcross says that he caught Ives trying to remove his wallet and pushed her hard against the ground. When she began to cry, he sodomized her and began strangling her until she lay still. He hid her body under some scraps of construction material and waited until dark and went home. This is Frances Brown, 32 years old, killed sometime in October of 1989. Her body was found November 11th, 1989 in the Genesee River Gorge. Shawcross, he claimed to have choked Brown with his penis while having oral sex and continued to have sex with her body after she died. When he dumped her body down a nearby embankment, so much debris was dragged down with it that police thought the body had been covered intentionally. Maria Welch was 22 years old. She was missing since November 5th, 1989. Found that same year. Shawcross picked up Maria Welch from Lake Avenue and took her to a small beach near the banks of the Genesee River, where they argued over a suitable price before they began having sex. Again, he claims that she tried to take his wallet and he strangled her. He later changed his story and told investigators that he had become angry and killed her when he realized that she was menstruating. He drove further down the road next to the river and dumped her body in some bushes. On November the 11th, police investigators from the 60-strong serial crimes unit identified the body as Frances Brown. Incredibly, no one in the newly formed task force uncovered the fact that a known sex offender and child killer who was still on parole was living in their midst. And remember, it wasn't reported because everywhere he went, the community would get into an uproar. You know, they wouldn't allow it. So when he moved to Rochester, they kept it quiet. And look what happened. June Stotts, 30 years old. She disappeared on October 23rd, 1989. Body found November 23rd, 1989 in the Genesee River Gorge. June Stotts was a friend of Arthur and Rose and a regular visitor in their home. She was also mildly retarded. Shawcross had seen June sitting near the river on a warm November day and asked her to go for a ride with him. She gratefully accepted, and they drove down to a local beach where they played on the sand and fed the birds before they walked to a deserted area and lay down on the ground to make love. At some point in their lovemaking, Shawcross claims that he made an innocent comment about her not being a virgin, and she started screaming. He then held his hand over her mouth to silence her, but soon realized that he had suffocated her. He then cut her open with his knife so that she would decompose quicker, and covered her with a blanket and brush and left her. So he actually did that after. He came back and did that. He later claimed to have removed her vagina and some of her organs and ate them. Jesus. Her boyfriend waited 3 weeks to report her missing. This is Elizabeth Gibson. Age unknown. Killed in 1989. Body found November 27th, 1989. She got into Shawcross's car to keep herself warm while he was getting coffee from a diner. They had oral sex in the car, and again, he claimed that she tried to take his wallet, and he got angry and strangled her. Shawcross later told police that he had struggled so hard that he had broken the gear shift in his car. He disposed of Gibson's body in a new area near Wayne County, as he feared that the police were getting too close. This is Darlene Trippi, 32-year-old, killed on or about December 15th, 1989. Shawcross picked Darlene Trippi up from the Lake Avenue area and drove to an isolated car park. After the money was paid, they indulged in oral sex, but Shawcross failed to get an erection. She became frustrated and called him names, and he choked her until she lay dead under him. He dumped her body in open woodland. This is June Cicero, 34 years old, killed December 1989. Shawcross picked up June Cicero and took her to another isolated area and attempted sex with her before strangling her, virtually right under the noses of the investigating police. The Genesee River killer had struck again. This time, he dumped the body off a bridge over the Salmon River. 2 days later, he returned to the dump site with a small handsaw and cut the vagina from her frozen body and ate it. Felicia Stevens, 19 years old. She was last seen alive December 26, 1989. Body found January 3rd, 1990. The final victim was another prostitute, a black woman named Felicia Stevens. In later interviews, he stated that he could not recall any details of Felicia's murder, only that she was black and he had strangled her and dumped her body near those of Jean Cicero and Dorothy Blackburn. On December 31st, 1989, hikers found a pair of blue jeans with her ID in the pocket. An aerial search found the body on January 3rd. It also spotted a vehicle cruising the area and recorded its license number, tracing the plate back to Arthur's live-in girlfriend. He was arrested on January 5th, 1990. I mean, I felt like I was describing some kind of a horror movie, like Silence of the Lambs or some kind of psychological thriller about some mass killer, some serial killer. But the people of Rochester, New York really went through this. And there's people going through this now in some areas. Don't forget about this. This is the FBI reporting over 500 unsolved murders attributed to serial killers. Majority of the suspects that they have are all truck drivers, long-haul truck drivers. Doesn't mean that they're right about who the suspects are. But these are all unsolved. And this is like from like 2004. So the number is probably doubled. So just remember, guys, we are living amongst the apex predator. Yeah, that's putting it mildly, really. Pitbull. Yeah, kind of reminds me of Rex Heuermann. This guy might be worse. Good to see you, Brad. Welcome in. Yeah, I mean, what else can you say but damn? Pitbull. I'm not sure I believe he cannibalized these victims. Maybe I just can't let myself believe it. It's a real thing. Yeah, your mind just kind of skips past that, huh? You're like, oh, he ate their body parts. And your brain just quickly forgets it. Like, nope, that's not real. But it's real. And it just goes to show how sick these people are. And remember, they called him normal. These girls were happy to go with him. Oh, you're not the killer. You're just, what's his name? You know, you're a regular. You're not the serial killer. He would sit in the Dunkin' Donuts and talk with investigators. They would talk about how they had cars posted up on certain streets. And he would kind of talk to him about it like, oh, okay. They would tell him how they're doing stakeouts and things like that. Freaking crazy. All right, guys. That's going to do it for today's live stream. Sorry if I gave you a tummy ache. I know I gave myself one. Yep, just a guy who liked to go fishing. I mean, what guy doesn't like to go fishing? But I mean, I think it might be a red flag if you got a single guy who's hanging out with young boys, you know, or young kids, taking them down to the lake. I know I wouldn't let my kids do that. But then again, you know, I'm educating myself on what to look for and what not to. And I don't trust anybody. Borderline paranoid, really. But if you could, guys, hit the like button on the way out. Don't forget to share this video. And if you're joining us late and you're part of that replay crew, you know what to do. Leave me a comment and I'll get back to you. If anybody needs to get a hold of me for whatever reason, you can always email me at sleuthintuition@gmail.com. And you can always go check out the website at sleuthintuition.com. And all my contact information is there. And I want to thank everybody who supports me, all my members, my mods, and all of you who continue to donate to the Cash App. I could not do this without you guys. So shout out to you. I'll see you guys again real soon. Peace out.